Welcome everyone to Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross. Today at Wimbledon, we've got Alcaraz over Fritz in 4 sets, and Jannik Sinner beats Novak Djokovic in straights, setting up a Channel double Sinner-Alcaraz final, and for a 7th straight major, the champion will be either Jannik Sinner or Carlos Alcaraz. We will preview that final on today's episode. First, let's cover these semis, and let's start with the marquee, a match I was very much looking forward to. Sinner-Djokovic, yeah, I couldn't wait. I was really amped up. I knew that there were some health question marks coming in to a degree on both sides of the net, and I was fingers crossed that it wouldn't play a role. I thought we were going to get a more competitive Sinner-Djokovic match than we did at Roland Garros. I was unfortunately wrong about that. And from a neutral perspective, it was a bit of a bummer. It was a disappointing match, that semifinal. What's the headline? The headline is that Djokovic's movement was not even close to good enough to compete with Jannik Sinner. He did not have it in the legs. He did not have an ability to hang in baseline rallies. He did not have an ability to defend with any kind of effectiveness. So ultimately, no matter how well Jannik Sinner played on the other side of the net, and there's a lot of reasons to praise the tennis that he played, that's what decided the match here, no matter what. Now, I was not all that concerned after the Caboli match. I wasn't actually very concerned at all after the Caboli match. Let's go from square one here. I see the fall. Players fall on grass all the time. This is a very normal, regular occurrence at Wimbledon. And that's what Novak said after as well. He said, it's normal, it's part of it. And Novak has probably slipped at Wimbledon 40 times in his career, if not more. We only saw 2 points after the slip, and Djokovic looked fine in those 2 points, but I would acknowledge either good or bad, there's not much room for evaluation either way when you're only looking at 2 points. The alarm bells weren't ringing until yesterday when Djokovic canceled practice. Even then, I wasn't necessarily hitting the panic button, because I know that at this stage at a major, canceling practice doesn't come with all that much consequence. And if you want to take any kind of precaution, if you want to take a rest day, if you want, just to really make sure not to aggravate anything and to maximize recovery and healing, then skipping practice is a measure that can be taken, again, without much consequence. And therefore, I don't think it necessarily means that a player is going to turn up severely compromised in their next match. And I promised coming into the match that the health stuff coming in for both, I would assume that we're going to see both men at 100%, unless there's clear and obvious visual evidence that one player isn't there. And there was, because the Djokovic movement was just not what it needs to be. It was impaired. And therefore, the domination in any baseline exchange was basically as extreme as you could imagine. And that's why through 2 sets, and I don't have the final number on this, but through 2 sets, Jannik Sinner was perfect. He was undefeated in rallies that stretched 9 shots or more. It's the reason why you saw this incredible disparity between Djokovic on first and second serve, winning 77% when he lands the first serve, only 17% behind his second. Which I didn't look up if that's a career low at Wimbledon, but I'd be really surprised if it weren't. If you're only winning 17% of your second serve points, you're not winning rallies. You're not winning from the back. Now, what's the context around all of this? Well, I wrote in my notes during their Roland Garros match that it just looked a little bit too easy for Jannik Sinner to hit through Djokovic's speed. That it was the first time that Novak really looked 38 to my eyes, because he struggled to cover the power and the baseline quality against Sinner. This was just on another level where the defensive commitment wasn't there, the recovery out of the corners wasn't there, the explosive sliding into the corners wasn't there. And as a result, you also saw, all of this kind of tactical point shortening that went over the top, obviously, from what your sweet spot would be, what your optimal performance would be. But also Novak Djokovic's comments after the match were interesting because he rejected the idea that this was just an unlucky incident. He said, quote, "I don't think it's bad fortune. It's just age. The wear and tear of the body. As much as I'm taking care of it, the reality hits me right now, the last year and a half, like never before, to be honest. It's tough for me to accept that because I feel like when I'm fresh and fit, I can still play very good tennis. I've proven that this year. Playing best of 5, particularly this year, has been a real struggle for me physically. The longer the tournament goes, the worse the condition gets. I reached the semis of every slam this year. I have to play Sinner or Alcaraz. These guys are fit, young, sharp. I feel like I'm going into the match with the tank half empty. It's not possible to win the match like that. It is what it is." The first aspect of that is Djokovic being classy as to just say, like, look, I'm not unlucky. This is part of it all. But it's also an acknowledgement of the fact that there is just a clear trend here. The performance, the tennis the consistency at the majors has been good. It hasn't been so good outside the majors, but the consistency at the majors has been really good. But the ability to hold up at the end of week 2 has been really pretty awful. And not all of these incidents are the same, but let's just go through the last 7 slams since the start of 2024. Australian Open 2024, flat performance, really flat. Reports of a fever emerged a little bit later on after the match that next week. Okay. Roland Garros last year, meniscus tear, withdrawal. Wimbledon 2024 comes back, makes the final, but the movement against Alcaraz in that final was not good enough. US Open 2024 still has that knee brace on. Physically pretty poor. Wasn't even sliding at that US Open. You can't say that he looked fit coming into that event. You can't. Australian Open 2025, hamstring injury, retirement against Zverev in the semis. Roland Garros 2025, clean bill of health. Nothing you can say there. Wimbledon 2025. He slips in the quarters. He pulls up with massive movement issues in the semis. So what? 6 out of the last 7 majors, he's bowed out, looking depleted or injured, right? 6 out of the last 7. That's when it becomes really hard to say that this was just a freak incident and that this has nothing to do with aging, that this has nothing to do with, and I don't think anybody's saying that, and Novak said it, which really kind of gives extra credence to this whole idea. Unfortunately, the one thing that I wish we did get, I wish we got like unvarnished, completely, I guess, free to speak his mind Djokovic, is to really kind of dig into the details of that fall. Was there something different about that fall compared to again, I'm just making up a number, but the 50 other times you've fallen at Wimbledon? Was that time worse? Or was the body not able to respond to it as well? Or was the fact that your movement looked so rough in this semifinal against Sinner, did that have less to do with the fall than we would all assume? I don't know. Novak, again, I think because he didn't want to take credit away from Sinner, because he didn't want to look like he had sour grapes, because he didn't want to look like he was making excuses. He didn't want to get into all of that, which is classy, but it leaves me with some curiosities. The one way in which this kind of looked like Australian Open 2024, the semi against Sinner, or Wimbledon last year, the final against Alcaraz, is it seems like the physical really bled into the mental side. Djokovic's hustle wasn't really there. His intensity certainly wasn't there. There was a point in the first set, early in the second, where he was just missing just making a lot of quick errors. He was making mistakes that you would look at face value and you would think, well, that has nothing to do with the movement because he's missing from the middle of the court. But to my eyes, it still kind of did have to do with the movement because it was a lack of intensity. He was disengaged. He was low energy. Djokovic is one of the greatest competitors mentally, in some ways the greatest that we've ever laid our eyes on in this sport. But we got to call a spade a spade. The compete level was way off here. This is where I think it comes down to belief, which is a fairy tale word that I often hate in tennis discourse. Oh, so-and-so doesn't have the belief, and that's why they can't win. I've always freaking hated that. Always been like, what does that even mean? Belief. What does belief do for you? You can't win a point with belief. You don't lose a point with lack of belief. So I just think it's misused. I remember talking to Jack Draper after he beat Felix Auger-Aliassime at the US Open last year. And I asked him a question when he was a huge underdog. He was very, very young at the time. And I said, did you believe you could win before the match? And Jack was like, nope. I usually don't believe. I usually have tons of doubts coming into every match. And he said he told me that a lot of players lie and they don't like to admit that, but most players have a ton of doubts coming into matches. It's something that Rafa, even as great as Rafa was, he's talked about that, feeling a lot of doubt all the time. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Anyway, that's a whole tangent. A lot of the time, I think this whole belief thing is just a fairy tale. But where I do think it matters is when it affects effort. That's where I think it matters. And I think a combination of Djokovic knowing how good Jannik Sinner is, understanding and feeling what the head-to-head has been like recently, and feeling his legs, and feeling the limitations that he was playing under because of his legs, his movement. That's where I think belief wasn't there, effort level went down. Because to me, if he still felt inspired as if he could win, you would have seen a different Novak emotionally. It wouldn't have been so flatline. But you can't separate that side, the mental side, the way he was competing, from the physical side. It's just impossible. I would just say I think head-to-head makes it worse. And now it continues to, I won't continue to hammer this because this felt like kind of a different thing altogether, but I do think it still needs to be acknowledged. Sinner has now won 11 of the last 12 sets in this head-to-head. And Jannik has only been broken twice in those last 12 sets, 2 times. Now, independent of Djokovic, Sinner served great. 74% for the match. He matched Djokovic with 12 aces. That was the one part of Novak's game that was working, was his first serve. But Sinner's was just as good. And he was making it impossible. Like, remember when Djokovic was compromised against Alcaraz in the first half of that Australian Open quarterfinal? What brought life into Novak? What allowed him to find spark and make headway in that match, even with compromised movement, is that Alcaraz missed first serves, and then Djokovic hit aggressive second serve returns. He was able to dictate off the first point and win points quickly on return on his own terms. So that is almost the way out for Novak if he wasn't going to be able to move side to side and hang with Sinner in a rally. And the way Sinner served, that was a non-possibility. I also think that Sinner's movement and absorption against Novak's attacking was impressive. Of course, Djokovic, whenever he had a chance to take a big cut, was looking to do so. And there were several occasions where I was very impressed with Sinner scrambling to find a way back into points and then to make it so that he could then expose Djokovic's movement. Drop shots, drop volleys. The way Sinner was moving up to that stuff was really impressive. How many great chip lobs did Jannik hit? Sinner did a great job when Djokovic hit drop volleys or drop shot approach shots, chipping the ball over Djokovic's head. Did it probably 4 or 5 times. And mentally, Sinner just showed great killer instinct. He never got lulled, especially the first 2 sets, because Djokovic was very low energy and he was point shortening. So it got a little bit sleepy out there. Not going to lie, it got a little sleepy. Quick bang bang points. Again, Djokovic going through the motions, 70% intensity. It's very easy to just feel that and to drop down to that level. Sinner did a nice job of my side of the net, and we're out for blood. We're out for the jugular. We're not letting up. We're gonna be savage. And Sinner was pretty savage for the first 2 sets. As for the other semifinal, Alcaraz Fritz. It was a really hot day in London. Haven't mentioned that yet, but it was north of 90 degrees, and that definitely quickened up the conditions. You could really tell in the Alcaraz Fritz match because there were a lot of quick points and easy holds. The match in some ways lacked the typical highlight reel appeal of a Carlos Alcaraz match. And depending on where you're coming from, you may have felt like it was kind of low on juice. But I got to say, from a purist standpoint, I thought this was high quality tennis. I thought this was a high level of execution on both sides of the net. Just a lot of well-executed first strike tennis. And that's why you had a lot of quick points and a lot of easy service holds. But I'd say both men played very well. I want to start with the end of the 4th set tiebreak. Looked like this one might go 5. Fritz was up 6-4, 4th set tiebreak, and Alcaraz won 4 points in a row to close out the match. And it's definitely worth deep diving on those points. 4 points in a row for Alcaraz. Let me tell you how these points started. Fritz made his first serve. Okay. Again, we're just doing the start. We're not doing the rest of the point. So that's how it started. On the next point, Taylor landed his return on the baseline. It was a 10 out of 10 return. The next point, Fritz hit a hard and deep return. I'd give it a 9 out of 10. And then on the next point, Fritz made his first serve again. By the way, Taylor Fritz leads the entire ATP Tour in first serve points won percentage in the last 52 weeks. He made 2 first serves, lost both points. What did we see from Alcaraz? I want to talk through each point, but we're going to see great block returns at the Fritz backhand. So no first ball forehands for Taylor. Can't generate as much pace with that first ball backhand. We're also going to see from Alcaraz great backhands of his own, both defensively and offensively at certain points. So at 6-4, we've got a stretch backhand block return into Fritz's backhand. Taylor takes it hard cross court. Alcaraz defends his backhand deep down the middle, and it neutralizes the rally. Actually draws a short ball. Alcaraz steps into his next shot, forehand inside-out approach, forehand volley, put away. Great block return. Was able to turn defense to offense after that. At 5-6, Alcaraz hits a body serve. Fritz hits this great return off the back of the baseline. Alcaraz absorbs it. Then he has to defend again off of a Fritz forehand inside out. And on the next ball, Taylor mishits the forehand, falling backwards. Kind of an unforced error. Ugly looking forehand. Now it's 6-all. Second serve. Fritz, backhand return. Deep and hard. Alcaraz fends it off, but he feeds Fritz a short ball. Taylor hits a forehand approach shot cross court. Alcaraz dips his forehand pass at Fritz's feet for a half volley that Taylor could not handle. The volley was basically impossible, but it was the approach shot that Taylor would like to have back because it was not a very brave approach shot. 6-7. Alcaraz block return at Taylor's backhand. Fritz takes a backhand cross court. Alcaraz changes down the line, off the baseline, forces the error. And that's your match. Very classic Alcaraz with his back against the wall. He finds another gear. And it's 4 beauties in a row where Taylor made one error, but ultimately put a lot of pressure on Alcaraz, and Carlos had the answers. Now, the one regret for Fritz is that he did have one forehand to really hit at 6-all, and he played it a bit tentative. He did attack. It just wasn't a very deadly attack. And there was also maybe at 5-6, another forehand that he looked to attack inside out, but it was defended rather easily. So he was not lethal enough on these attacking forehands. And that's where you fault him. But other than that, there's actually not much he did wrong. And he certainly got those he certainly started off each point the way he would want to start off the points. And to lose 4 in a row like that is pretty crazy. It was a similar deal early in the third set when Alcaraz got the decisive break. Fritz was basically helpless in his own service game. That was one of those clap your hands, too good return games from Alcaraz, which is pretty rare against a guy who has the firepower of Taylor on serve, on grass. It was also a stellar serving performance by Alcaraz. In the first set, 4 out of Carlos's 5 service games, he got at least 3 unreturned serves. In the third set, he only dropped 1 point on serve. It was a double fault. Taylor only made 5 returns in play. Alcaraz, 88% first serve points won, 65% first serves in. That is high impact serving. That's what that is. What were the adjustments from Taylor? How did Fritz look to punch up above his weight and pull off the upset? I saw 2 things mainly. Fritz was much deadlier on second return, and he was hitting his second serves much bigger. So the emphasis was to jump on top of Alcaraz and apply max pressure off the first couple shots. And this won Taylor the second set, along with superior consistency as he was timing the ball a little bit better from the back of the court throughout the second set and kept the unforced errors down lower. If you look at how this went down at the end of the second, it was the increased aggression from Taylor in the second serve dynamics that won him the second. At 5-all, Fritz missed a ton of first serves and still got a bunch of unreturnables because Alcaraz couldn't get a handle on the hard second serve. And then at 5-6, he hit a huge second serve return, deep middle, and then a forehand winner off the fourth shot, which was a pattern that he was able to execute on a somewhat regular basis, to be honest. Certainly the one he was looking for. Deep middle return, nuclear on the next ball. That was the pattern. Alcaraz double faulted in that game as well, which was relevant and earned if you're Taylor Fritz, because Alcaraz countered Fritz's aggressive mentality on the second return by hitting huge second serves. And for the most part, it was a really impressive display from Alcaraz in his ability to just up the ante and get a little bit more out of his second serve to keep Taylor at bay. It was a really smart approach, though, from Fritz, because usually in this kind of matchup against Alcaraz, where he's dominated from neutral and from the baseline, it's the second serve dynamic that's really going to suffer. So Taylor was looking to change that by hitting really big second serves and really big second returns. I thought it was a great match from Fritz, honestly. What are the nitpicks? He got broken in the first game of the match. Didn't get much serve damage in that game. Wasn't an awesome start, obviously. He was a little bit safe on the big points at the very end, trying to close out the fourth. But overall, it was the fact that Alcaraz just has a higher gear available to him that made the difference in this match, far more than anything that Taylor really did wrong. It was close. It was closer than I thought. Fritz surpassed expectations. But Alcaraz, in big moments, had obviously more magic, which you would expect. All right, final preview. Head-to-head, 8-4 Alcaraz. 5 in a row to Alcaraz. There's probably nothing we've talked about more on the show in 2025 than the Sinner-Alcaraz head-to-head, whether it be mailbags, whether it be post-Rome, post-Roland Garros, pre-Wimbledon. And I know there may be new viewers here, but I'm going to try not to be repetitive here. I'm going to try to keep it fresh and take a look at what are the factors that make this particular meeting on Sunday at Wimbledon interesting in a distinguished way. And if you want to go back and check out the Roland Garros final analysis, if you didn't, encourage you to do so. Some of the mailbags post-RG, pre-Wimbledon, encourage you to do so, because we talk about maybe some other stuff that I won't get into here. But if I'm synthesizing the biggest key in their head-to-head at the moment, it's the clutch gap. It's the clutch gap. That's where Alcaraz has pulled away. The fact that in their head-to-head, Carlos has saved match points and won twice. The fact that Alcaraz has won deciding tie breaks twice. The fact that Sinner has won the first set in 4 of the last 5 matches, yet he's lost all 5. I guess the most honest way to look at this head-to-head is not to say that Alcaraz has been so dominant and that Sinner needs to change all of this and do all of that better, and to change this and change that and improve this and improve that. That's not the most honest way. To suggest that Jannik Sinner needs to change the dynamics of this head-to-head in some drastic way, or to close this massive gap in order to have a chance at reversing the result, that's not rooted in reality. That's not acknowledging what the margins have been. They've been so minuscule that the only reality of this is that when it's time to play the big points, Sinner needs to find a way to get it done if he wants to win. Because so far, Alcaraz has, at least recently, has just disproportionately gotten the better of the really, really important moments in these matches. Now, here at Wimbledon, there is some intrigue when it comes to the surface speed. We've talked about this, but let's put some details and some numbers on it now that we're really at the moment. So Tennis Abstract does a surface speed database. The way these metrics are calculated are through adjusted ace rate. So it takes who's in a field, who's actually playing the matches, what would be their expected number of aces based on what they normally do on a, per point basis. And if they hit far above average aces, that's going to rank as a quick surface. If it's below average, if it's below their average for what they usually do, because it's adjusted ace rate, then it's going to show to be a slower surface. There are 68 events in the Tennis Abstract Surface Speed Database. 68. The reality is, all of Sinner and Alcaraz's recent meetings, the last 5, the Alcaraz win streak, they have all come at events that are far below the average if you split that 68 in half. Roland Garros is ranked 60th. Rome is ranked 63rd. Indian Wells is a hard court, but it's ranked 57th. Right around the range of Roland Garros. Beijing is a hard court, but it's ranked 47th. Wimbledon is ranked 25th. It's not incredibly high, but it's 25th. Now, what effect might that have? What effect might the conditions have? Let's go through some of that stuff. So here's how grass helps Sinner. He can potentially play fast enough into Alcaraz's forehand to keep it quieter. It's been something that I think has just been generally true about Alcaraz, which is that if he has time to load up his forehand, you're in massive trouble. He's often unplayable when he has time to operate on his forehand. So it's really important that somebody's able to strip that time away. And the conditions being a little bit faster at Wimbledon than they have been in their previous meetings as of late might help Sinner do that. Jannik can find more comfortable contact points off the kick serve and the heavy forehand. Something that we've seen Alcaraz do at Roland Garros, something we saw him do at Indian Wells, is to incorporate a little bit more height to get the ball up above Sinner's strike zone, especially on the backhand side. And the same can be said for the second serve, where Alcaraz has a very heavy kick that can neutralize Sinner's desire to be attacking on the second return. And the third factor is that if Sinner happens to have an above-average serving day, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, it could be very meaningful on a grass court, far more meaningful than it might be on some of these slower surfaces. How might grass help Alcaraz? Because obviously, we're talking about a guy who is a multiple-time Queen's champion, a multiple-time Wimbledon champion, the back-to-back defending champion. How does grass help Alcaraz? Well, movement and defense as an advantage is maximized. It's something that he's enjoyed against Jannik Sinner. Sometimes from start to finish, sometimes more so late in a match. But however you want to slice it, we've left these Alcaraz-Sinner encounters often talking about how Alcaraz's movement, his ability to turn points around, was an advantage over Jannik. Alcaraz's attacking instinct is rewarded. Who is better at figuring out ways to do damage from neutral positions, being unpredictable, coming up with something deadlier than expected, using creativity to find different ways to bother his opponent's contact points, wrong foot them, the proactivity of net approaching, the clinicality of the drop shotting. This is a surface that, despite only being 25th in speed ratings, I think everybody would agree, based on how low the bounce is and how much harder it is to move well on the surface. Offense is still rewarded. And Alcaraz, compared to Sinner, he's a little bit better at getting into attack than Jannik is. Jannik needs a little bit more of an invitation. Alcaraz needs none. And then the last thing, how about drawing on past experiences, which are good experiences? Because sometimes I do think that experience is the most overrated thing in tennis. I don't want experience if that experience is losing. I don't want to be in 3 major finals in my career if I've lost all 3. Going into the 4th, that ain't helping me. That's hurting. I want good experience. That's what Alcaraz has. He can potentially draw strength from the memories of the past 2 Wimbledon finals, and he will feel as if it's familiar. And this is from a nerve standpoint, Wimbledon can be a little bit different. And Jannik has been really good at handling these big occasions. But certainly there's a certain gravity to center court at Wimbledon on Championship Sunday that Alcaraz will be very accustomed to. That could help him. Let's do paths to victory. Sinner path. I've already alluded to the fact that Alcaraz moves a bit better. Well, part of this would be expected based on their athletic builds. Carlos Alcaraz listed at 6'1". I don't really buy it. I think he's 6 feet. Sinner listed at 6'3". I don't really buy that. Looks more like 6'4" to me. Regardless, Alcaraz is more compact, and therefore you would almost expect that he might have a movement advantage over a longer, lankier, taller Jannik Sinner. But what should Sinner have? A serving advantage. Jannik Sinner needs to use the 4 inches that he has. Serve better. And statistically, serving better should be doable. The ask or the task is not that Sinner needs to redline or do anything out of the ordinary. The ask is that he needs to do maybe a little bit better than he normally does on his average day over the course of the year. Because in his last 5 matches against Alcaraz, and I get that there's extra pressure and that there's knowledge that you have to serve even better because of who's on the other side of the net and all of that. But it doesn't change the fact that in the last 5 matches against Alcaraz, Sinner has one time been at his season average of 62%, and the other 4 he's been below it. And when you are playing the very, very best, you have to operate at a higher level, not a lower level. And this is so important because Sinner's serve is deadlier than Carlos Alcaraz's serve. The overall numbers over the course of the last year back that up as well. Sinner in first serve win percentage, 4th best among top 50 players. Alcaraz, 29th best among top 50 players. It's the one thing that he's actually below average in, is winning points with his first serve. But for Sinner, in order to see that advantage come to fruition, he's got to make his first serve. So that's kind of the first part of a Sinner victory, in my opinion, is just serving better. I think the other part is that he needs to deliver a bit more on his attacking chances. And in order to do that, he needs to create quality outside of pure power. Because there have been too many times against the outstanding defensive capabilities of Alcaraz where Jannik has had a short ball to attack on his forehand and he has been neutralized or countered. Not because he hasn't hit the ball hard, but because he hasn't achieved width, or that he hasn't achieved forward pressure, or that he hasn't threatened with a drop shot. Essentially, or that he hasn't finished a volley. Essentially, he has to be a little bit more like Alcaraz, which is to complement the baseline power with other ways to finish and to put away points. I think that's been just an area where Jannik can make up that 5% improvement that he needs to create some meaningful separation in this very, very tight head-to-head. Alcaraz path. Well, first I want to address one thing with Carlos, which is the Dimitrov blueprint. Is that even a thing? I think that's a question worth asking. Grigor Dimitrov was up 2-0 on Jannik Sinner. Did Grigor do anything in that match that provides some sort of blueprint that is replicable? I would say mostly not really. Dimitrov built that lead by serving 130 into the corners and crushing first forehands. That doesn't provide any meaningful tactical guidance, needless to say. Now, the one thing is the slice backhand, which definitely had its effectiveness. And I think for Sinner, who's such a pure ball striker, who likes to stand up on the baseline and suffocate his opponents, any way you can get it out of that strike zone is so meaningful. And we've already talked about how Alcaraz, on some of the slower, higher bouncing surfaces, has used height in order to do so, to get it up above Sinner's shoulders. And on grass, I think you do it the other way, and you incorporate some of that backhand slice to get it low. And I think Alcaraz will do it some, but I'm curious to see how often. And the one thing that I will say is if Sinner's backhand gets hot and starts to become a real buzzsaw in the match, I do think that'd be a really great response from Carlos. If you're going to get really hot on the two-hander, well, I'll give you a slice. Get hot off of that. And that might be a little bit more difficult for Sinner to take control off of. I think for Alcaraz, the net rushing could be and needs to be a real difference maker for him. Sinner's looking like a handful from the back of the court. There's no doubt about it. Other than his shaky forehand play after the fall against Dimitrov, the last two guys, I mean, Shelton and Djokovic, have been brutalized in the baseline rallies. And they've been looking rushed, and Sinner has been playing really fast with great depth off of both wings. It's been difficult to find any headway. So I don't think Alcaraz wants to take any chances with getting neutralized whenever he has an opportunity to come forward and finish. And I think that that is an area where Alcaraz will say, this is my edge. Whenever I have an advantage in the point, I am going to finish it with my lethal forecourt skills. And on the other end, I know that Jannik can't really do the same to me. I'm curious to also see Alcaraz using his slice in defense. If I'm Alcaraz, defend low. Defend low all day. Sinner wants a midcourt ball in his strike zone so that he can hit one of those eyes closed forehands from the middle of the court that nobody's touching. He wants to blast the ball into the corner and say, my work here is done. It's impossible for Jannik to do that, or at least way harder for Jannik to do that, if Alcaraz is in emergency situations and he slices short and low. You're going to end up in situations where Sinner has to hit an approach shot, come up and finish a volley. And the more Alcaraz can make him do that, the more we're going to see, does Jannik have the hands to finish tough volleys? You take Jannik from, I can finish a midcourt ground stroke out of my strike zone any day of the week with my eyes closed once I roll out of bed, to a situation that's far less comfortable for him. And that's why I think that the slice defense for Alcaraz is so crucial. Last key for Alcaraz, avoid expectation like poison. He needs to do everything he can, and his team as well, to convince himself that he is not no darn favorite in this match. Because that expectation is poison. He needs to try to stay calm and keep the joy. And he's been really good mentally since the start of the clay court season. But it's just going to be interesting in this spot. Is he going to feel burdened by all the prior success and the massive win streak and the back-to-back Wimbledon titles? I'm not, it's a very interesting mental dynamic, but he's got to try to convince himself that this is going to be another war and prepare for adversity. Prepare for Sinner to win sets. I mean, hope that doesn't happen, but prepare for it to happen. I'm going with my pre-tournament prediction of Alcaraz in 5. Again, I think that this should be close, as it's been consistently. But I've been very impressed with the way Alcaraz is serving. I think even if Sinner has a good serving day, Alcaraz can to some extent at least go toe-to-toe with him enough. And I think the movement advantage with the scrambling and the slice defense, I expect that to play a role for Carlos. I expect the net rushing and the drop shotting to play a massive role for Carlos. A lot of the audacious attacking that works so well on grass is exactly what we've seen work well for Alcaraz in pressurized situations against Jannik Sinner. But more than anything, I just can't wait to sit back and watch this. And can't wait to talk to you guys for Monday Match Analysis after it's over. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.